Okay, my name is Tai Helen Hai. I'm currently heading the Binance Charity Foundation. At the same time, I'm also a United Nations Goodwill Ambassador. I've been working in Africa in the past 8 years, supporting on job creation and economic transformation.
Gosh, that's too short. It's very interesting. Out of all the bios, yours was the longest, and you just did that like that. I'm sorry, we're going to have to go a lot deeper to find out a bit more. Bill, please.
I'm a venture capitalist by I was trained to design computer chips. I ended up in venture capital. I've been in that line of work since 1991. Some people know me as the main early investor in Bitfury. I funded their silicon. I'm a chairman of the board of HUD-8, a backer of CryptoKitties, but I also have a nonprofit that focuses on social good.
And you're crazy about kitesurfing.
Yes.
As well, which is always
still
interesting. Okay, so we'll start off in the context of the topic, which is, firstly, I suppose, is there a bottleneck in philanthropy and social impact investing, and can blockchain help it? So what are the biggest challenges nowadays?
So the answer is definitely yes. Actually, in my personal opinion, I think the Western-dominated development framework has really have a big challenge today. I want to give you some figures. Post-Second War until today, globally, from 1960 to 2008, there's about 200 developing economies globally. In our human time, in those 60 years, there's only 2 economies in those periods actually moved from lower income status to higher income status. That is South Korea plus Taiwan. China likely to be the third one by 2025. And out of those 200 developing economies, only 13 of them moved from middle income status to high income status. So out of those 13, 8 of them are in Europe. The original GDP gap is small. The other 5 are the Asia 4 tigers plus Japan. It's a common consensus in the 60s. African country has a much better chance for economic transformation. Asia is a hopeless continent. But the reality today is the opposite. What went wrong? I would say the development model went wrong. Because in the past 60 years, the current development model dominated by the Western theory actually didn't work. For example, I was born in China. The year I was born, 1978, the GDP per capita in China is only $154, which is less than 1/3 of the sub-Saharan African countries. And in my generation, I witnessed 680 million people has been lifted out the international poverty line. And according to World Bank, number of people living under the international poverty line in the world since post-Second World War to today didn't decline if I exclude those 680 million people. So in terms of global development, China made it the biggest contribution. You know, we know there's trillions of money have been flooded to Africa, you know, from the West. But most of the countries today are still trapped in poverty. So what went wrong? One of the things I want to say, we need to also, and that's also related to today, because looking at those periods, there's the second industrial revolution, there's the third industrial revolution, and now today with blockchain, we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution. The secret of Asia's economic transformation, China's economic transformation, because in the 60s and 80s, during the second industrial revolution, which those countries I mentioned, they were able to capture that opportunity. They were able to create millions of jobs for the people in the bottom of the pyramid. And that is the jumpstart of those countries' economic transformation.
I want to ask you about the impact of blockchain in the fourth industrial revolution, but I don't use up all the content in one sentence. We have to make sure that we
I'm going to finish soon. So I'm talking about...
okay.
you
in that case, go for it. Tell me.
Global context.
We sure do now.
Yeah. So I'm talking about, you know, looking at today, you know, in the second industrial revolution, those countries are able to benefit. And what happened in the third industrial revolution? In the third industrial revolution, which is internet-based in the past 20 years, actually what happened in the world, 1% of the population actually started holding 99% of the world wealth. Yeah. And now today, if we're talking about blockchain, if we want blockchain to stay in the industry, we really need to think whether blockchain can really creating values for the community. And that community, if we're talking about today, we live in a world of 7 billion population. The bottom billion have been left behind. The key question is whether actually we're developing using the technology to support the bottom billion.
So I'm going to come back and ask what the bottleneck is, to propagate down to that 1 billion so that they can create independent, self-sustaining prosperity without creating massive national debt in all of those countries that you mentioned whose prosperity index for the poorer has risen. So there's a little more detail we need to come back to. But Bill, welcome. I'm keen to ask you a little bit about what you've been up to. And also, in terms of this bottleneck, some of the organizations that you've been involved with have actually gone quite some way towards helping start to transform that. Can you share some of those?
Yeah, so what you're referring to, when I funded Bitfury, so if you think about how far the reputation of cryptocurrency has come in actually quite a short time, the era in which I was funding Bitfury, Silk Road was still around. Mt. Gox was melting down. People looked at the space as sort of a dirty, corrupt land of criminals and drug dealers. And here I was, kind of a legit guy that's seen as a goody two-shoes.
It was a bold investment at the time, right?
Yes, it was.
What did your friends say? Are you crazy?
Oh my God, yeah. So I remember thinking, man, I'm going to write this check and I'm going to be on every list of every three-letter agency for the rest of my life.
Was it to fund what nanometer?
A 55, or for the very first silicon at Bitfury, 55 nanometer ASIC, and wow. You know, the history of the management team from Bitfury, they met in the open source community, but some of them were, you know, kind of Russia and Eastern Europe, and you know, and my friends in the venture business, they literally would make fun of me, and they're like, "Bill, you like the Russian Bitcoin mining company?" You know, it was really kind of weird, but anyway, I as a technologist, I could see it. And so I wrote this check, and then I spent a couple of years trying to figure out, like, how do I convince people of what I know, that this is a legit team with a legit business. Yeah. And among the other things, I had a good social circle, and I was doing these kite trips on Necker Island with Richard Branson. So at one of the kite trips, I said, you know.
Sorry, name drop.
Well, he kiteboards. You guys want to meet Richard kiteboard.
Cool.
Anyway, so we had this trip on Necker Island, and I said to myself, you know, there are so many other things that this technology can be used for, but people don't focus on it. So we literally just declared we were doing the Blockchain Summit for Social Good. And this was 5 years ago. Is
that the famous hot tub roundtable?
A lot of things have come out of the hot tub. Yeah, so I got Hernando de Soto, the economist that wrote Mystery of Capital, to be a kind of an anchor with Michael Casey, who at the time was the global finance reporter for the Wall Street Journal, and we built a thing around him. And through the years, a lot of great infrastructure kind of organizations to help increase the legitimacy of Bitcoin and blockchain have come out of that. So in the hot tub was formed with some lawyers from Steptoe and some other people. We created the Blockchain Trust Accelerator, which is now an organization, Interpol, FBI, CIA, RS, to make sure that it can be trusted. You know, the Global Blockchain Business Council was also born there.
Which we support.
Yes, the Barking Dog Project, which is Hernando de Soto's land titling project, was born on that island. We created a Marine Hope Spot off of, we protect 116 islands off of Western Australia with a data collection mechanism that is built on blockchain. We have the Honu Kitty Project, which was what I put in that thread when I wasn't supposed to. But anyway, it's a way to raise capital through the crypto community for endangered species. So a lot of things are just like kind of created there, and they spread. And
keep doing the hot tub meetings. They sound like they're terrific. I mean, that's a lot of impact from that. But Helen, going back to the work that you're doing, and you know, when you think about the future, and especially the challenge that you spoke of, 7 to 1 the billion. I mean, that's not inclusive. In fact, there are those that are saying that what we're doing is increasing the wealth divide. Can you give some examples of what bigger companies can do or are doing to help, propagate, to create independent prosperity? And that isn't dependent prosperity, because some of the growth you spoke about, if I may gracefully challenge back, has been fueled by debt, which isn't going to lead us to a great place, because how the hell are we going to pay this? So how do we create, you know that old saying about don't buy anybody some fish, teach them how to fish. Can you give some examples of the work that you're doing that's helping that, perhaps in Africa as well?
Yeah, exactly. First of all, I want to say job creation has been the key for poverty reduction. That's actually from the model I mentioned. So today, if we're talking about, with blockchain, I think one of the long-term goal in our foundation, we want to see actually how we can use technology to actually doing job creation for the bottom billion. Because today, if you ask me, the biggest challenge in the world actually is the Africa is a continent of 1.3 billion population. Currently, the refugee crisis in Europe is just the tip of the iceberg. Under the current development model, which is focused on health and education, thinking about billions of young Africans in the next 10 years, like with a little bit of education, reasonable, good health, but not enough jobs, this is going to be a big, huge global disaster. So this is something I think blockchain should do long term. But in the short term, I've been only asked to head up the foundation since last year. And I tell you, currently for the short term, there are three pillars work we're doing. Number one, global advocacy. Last year, as you can see in the video, we're the first company actually bringing blockchain into the UN General Assembly, on the discussion table. And in October, we host the first United Nations Blockchain for Sustainable Development Forum, reaching some industry consensus together with the UN. We should really looking at the technology, how to leverage that. But practically, we actually wanted to support companies who can really make impact. I look at about 50 companies in the past 6 months, and to be honest, half of them are not genuine project. It's just project with, the
only half.
Good, yes, doing good head, but actually it's for their own profit.
Right.
The other half, actually, they don't understand the last mile solution. Because I worked in Africa for 8 years, I understand it's important to develop the last mile solution. Today, in the industry, we've got a lot of entrepreneurs.
Is it possible to monitor that last mile solution?
That's why after looking at all the companies, Binance, we decided we are committing our finance and also we committing our technology to develop that. You saw in the video, actually, we are developing, at least we felt at this stage, it's the early stage of technology, but at least the blockchain can make charity transaction transparent. When you give 100 Swiss francs, actually, to a charity, to United Nations, you have no idea how much it reached the end beneficiary. With this platform we're developing, actually everybody can donate, and you can track where the money went and how much it actually
So that's
went
going to be like a quality mark in the future that nobody would want to give to a charity that didn't have transparency powered by blockchain, and you're pioneering this, right?
Exactly, and actually, tomorrow, actually in Singapore, in our Binance conference, our founder are going to launch our new initiative, where actually in 2019, our goal is to support 1 million children in Africa. And we're starting actually with the free lunch project, supporting them. And everybody actually, for example, you can go to our website saying, I want to support 10 African kids, and you can actually see how much the money went to them to feed them.
I'm so going to do that because I absolutely believe in the principle you just spoke
once
about.
you've done free lunch, actually you can, because this is point to point, you can then next to do education, you can do more things. So we felt this is also at least being the future, while making this charity transparent. This is the first mile we are doing. But with the long-term media goals, as I said, the job creation, we understand that's a major global problem.
I mean, I have a follow-up question, which maybe is on the website, which is how do you do attestation I can trust in the last mile, but maybe that's a different topic. Bill, I mean, that's quite a great example, isn't it, of the kind of work that's being done. What do you think the biggest social impact could be through investing like this, or through?
Well, I do think so. When I work on initiatives, because I think I was trained as a venture capitalist where I want a return, while I do agree that there are cases like free lunch program for kids that can't do it themselves yet, I'm oriented towards trying to fund things that can be economically sustainable on their own. Absolutely. And I do recognize that sometimes when you provide capital to something, some of it's got to go into the team to make the engine that keeps it as a recurring
There's also
thing.
danger of creating a dependency.
Yes, exactly. Because if somehow the funding source cuts off, the thing's dead, right? So I like to see my companies and my projects be self-sufficient if they can be.
And a plan to get there.
Yes, and it's not always the case, but I'm kind of motivated for the 501c3 I have. It's called ACTAI. It's for active conservation. So when we do things, we basically are taking a network of people that I have in my circles, typically entrepreneurs, technologists that have achieved something, and we go and we take our resources and we build enterprises that can actually help or help others that are building to make them sustainable.
And do you think that you will adopt this transparency through blockchain principle in some of the things that you
sure.
contribute?
Yeah. I mean, I think
You heard it here. Woo!
Yes.
Well
we're in a, right now we're in a position like the last project that we did was kind of a small fun one. When I funded CryptoKitties, I basically did it on the basis,
So it's you.
Well, I'm not the only funder. It was Andreessen, Fred Wilson, and myself, and a few others, angels. But I had known the founder before. He kiteboards. He comes to myself, and when they launched CryptoKitties, I was like, this is not a very kind of social good, productive thing, a cat, But I said, but you know what? I'll back you guys, but I want you to do something for me. And so they agreed, and that's when we launched that Hanu Kitty. So I got them to do a special edition cat. So I wrote a check, and then they did the special edition cat. We sold the cat for $25,000, and the proceeds of that went to the Sea Shepherd and to the Turtle Foundation and the BVI, split 50-50. And it funded the actual placement of a Sea Shepherd boat in front of a beach in Antigua for 24/7 monitoring so that people didn't steal the turtle eggs and kill the turtles. And so it's, it's actually actual active conservation and doing stuff, but that's...
Yes, but created from a digital manifestation from air, which was not there before.
Right.
That's the special magic thing that's quite special about that. So we hope to see more of that. Look, we haven't got long. I want to spend the rest of the day chatting with you two. But, and this is a little bit off topic, and I hope you don't mind me just nudging you to ask. You have been very connected in China, and I was wondering if you could share, what is China's role in this globalization plan? Can you give us anything from behind the scenes?
I think first of all, that today we have to understand there's a shift of power. So first, if I'm looking at how the World Bank is going to be formed post-Second World War, actually we all know because U.S. is afraid, European countries fall into the arms of the Soviet Union. That's actually how World Bank being formed and carrying development mandate. But as I mentioned, just early on when I started, now with what happened in the past 60 years, China is really rising with its own economic transformation. I give you some more context about actually what's China's strategy.
2 minutes.
Okay, so in summary, I don't think China have a big ground strategy. China's strategy has different kind of phases, but it has always been win-win. For example, China with Africa. In the 60s, in the 70s, China is very poor, but China was able to get into the United Nations because Africa countries. So at that time, China still go to Africa building the Tanzania Railway. And then that's very much aid-based. It started to evolve in the 80s, because then in the 80s, China had its own economic transformation. China needed a lot of natural resources. So China went to Africa. You are seeing most of the companies in the 80s buying natural resource. So from aid-based to a natural resource-based partnership. And they started to evolve again because in the 90s, China, because of the economic transformation, China had a very strong infrastructure capabilities. And African country, a lot of developing country, they need to build infrastructure in order for their development. That's why actually you are seeing Chinese companies in the past 20 years going to Africa, building infrastructures. Last year, according to the McKinsey report, more than 50% of the infrastructure today in Africa are built by the top 10 Chinese companies. So that's actually happened in the last 3 phases. But today, in 2015, actually there's a big shift. Why? When President Xi in the China-Africa Forum in Johannesburg, he said, in this round of China-Africa partnership, he committed $16 billion to African countries in the coming 3 years. But he said there's 10 projects, and the top 4 projects are the most important one. Number 1, industrialization for Africa. Number 2, modern agriculture. Number 3, infrastructure. Number 3, financing. So we're seeing actually now today, China is exporting its own development model, which is industrialization, modern agriculture development. And then financing and also infrastructure support is becoming enablers.
Will the financing involve blockchain in some way, like supply chain finance?
I think this is going to be part of it, but you have the even bigger picture, with the establishment of Asia Infrastructure Bank. This is a really game-changing story compared when the World Bank is going to be established.
I was a bit worried asking the question because I knew it was a bit off topic, but I knew you knew, so that's why I wanted to ask. Thank my wonderful panel. Thank you both very, very much indeed for that.